Let's go ahead and do number 7 now. So Tiana notices that service rep Bruno has no calls in how to category, which she knows is incorrect. Then we need to go to customer call log worksheet and change the call code in D10 to 12. And then Bruno will have 1 in how to category. So let's go ahead and do that. So we need to go to customer call log worksheet and D10 needs to be 12. So let's go D10 instead of 18, change it to 12, hit enter. Now this person has a how to. Go to the call type by rep worksheet and refresh the data in the pivot table. So when you are in the pivot table by itself, it won't be changed. So you need to click anywhere on the pivot table, go to pivot table analyze. You will see a refresh button here. Click on it. That will do the trick. And now you will see for Bruno, you have 1 how to. That completes number 7. Let's go to the next one. Number 8 says, go to the scores by date worksheet. In cell A3, insert another pivot table based on calls table. So we are going to scores by date. Again in A3, we need to go insert a pivot table. So you can go insert a pivot table. And this pivot table is again based on calls. So this time, instead of selecting the data, since the calls table has a name, you can just use the name instead. And scores by date, A3, that's where this pivot table is going to be. Now, use the scores as the name of the pivot table. Let's go ahead and change that. So right here it says pivot table 2. I'm going to change it to scores and hit enter. Now, how to modify the pivot table? It says display the date values as column headings. So date values goes to column headings. Which automatically groups the data by month. Then display the service rep name as row heading and average score data as values. Service name as row heading and average as values. Okay, now that completes number 8. You would see as soon as you do it, you have Jan, Feb, March. In task 9, you need to change the summary function from sum to average for the data in values area and then apply the number format with 2 decimal places. So here, if you click anywhere on the pivot table, you will see that under values, it says sum of average. We need to change this. So go value field setting and we need average instead of sum. So it should say average of average. Then right here, there is number format. There can be different types of number format. The one we are going to choose is called number format. And make sure it says 2 decimal places. So hit OK and OK. Now instead of this, all of these values are now averages to 2 decimal places. Let's move on to number 10. In cell A3, use the text average scores to identify the values. So right now, A3 says average of average. Let's go ahead and change that to use average scores. So average scores. In B3, use the text months. So let's go ahead and do that. Instead of column labels, we are going to say months. So you can actually go ahead and type that here. Make sure to make no typos. In A5, use the text service reps. So where it says role labels, we are going to call it service reps. And it doesn't look like it's letting me copy paste. So I'm going to copy paste here and make sure there are no trailing or extra spaces anywhere. Then finally, we need to apply light yellow pivot style medium 12 to match the other pivot table. For this, I will go click anywhere on the pivot table, wait until the pivot table design options appear, expand this to go to pivot table style 12. This is 11. This is the one which says light yellow pivot style medium 12. So let's select this one. In number 11, we are supposed to create a slicer based on the scores pivot table. And the field we are going to use is call type. So let's go ahead. I would highlight anywhere on the pivot table, go to pivot table analyze, then insert a slicer. The field I'm going to use is call type. Here's our slicer. The next part is resize the slicer to a height of 2.5. Okay, let's go ahead and resize that. And remember that we have not been given a width, just the height. So highlight your slicer. Here up top, you will see the slicer options. You have two different places where you have the height. One is the buttons. Don't do that one because that will change each one of these buttons. You want to focus on size and change that from 2.92 to 2.5. The next thing that we need to do is move the slicer so its upper left corner is in F3 and the lower right corner is in G14. So we move this to F3 and G14. So that fits in. In case it's not fitting in for you, you may like to increase the width of column F and column G slightly. Another thing is you may like to zoom this a lot and make sure where you are highlighting is F3 and G14. Okay, so that's done. In my case, it was not fitting that well, so I even increased the height of 14 just a little bit to make sure it is in G14. Then use the slicer to filter the scores pivot table by tech problem call type. So we go here and we just want to highlight the tech problem one so that only the tech problems are going to be shown. Keep saving your work. The next step is number 12. It says create a timeline slicer based on date field in the scores pivot table. So once again, this is your scores pivot table. You will highlight anywhere on the pivot table, go to pivot table analyze, and then insert timeline. We only have one field for which we can create a timeline, date. So go ahead, do that. This is your timeline filter. It says resize the timeline slicer to a width of 7 inches. So let's go back in here. Again, highlight your timeline slicer. Timeline appears on top, which has more options to edit or modify your timeline. And here the width needs to be 7. Enter. See how I have now 7 as my timeline width as indicated. Move the slicer so that upper left corner is in A16 and lower right is in G23. A16 and G23. So let's go ahead and put this in A16. And then this is not fitting in G23 right now, so let me move this a little bit. It seems like my width is not good enough for G23 because this one is going into H23. So I'll slightly increase the width of G so it still fits here. And make sure the top corner is in A16. Then it says use the timeline slicer to show data for February only. So I would click on months and just filter February. Now everything we have is only for February, is only for the tech problems. Once again, I'm going to save my data. Then resize the column B through C to 12 and then center the data in B3, C15. Let's go ahead. So B through C, I'm going to change column width to 12 points. And even if you do, once you do that, make sure wherever your top and bottom for each one of the slices were supposed to be, they are right where they're supposed to be. And then B3 through C15, you are supposed to center the data. So B3 and C15, this is Home tab, center. Go ahead and center your data. This is centered now. That should take care of it. Now you may go ahead and submit your file.